Good morning, Stampers. Welcome to Tina's Crafty Ink Spot. I'm Tina. Today's impromptu video on sponging. I've done a few cards the last few days, and I get a lot of emails and comments. How hard is that, and so on and so forth. I wanted to show you that it really isn't hard, and it's really quick, actually. And it's just simple sponging. So I'm going to show you how we created this one today with the snowdrops. Might change up the trees a little bit on this one. We'll see how that goes. And then here's another one that is just a simple layered sponging. I call these snowscapes. They're really quick and easy to do this time of year, and I enjoy doing them. I have several customers that, when I'm making holiday cards for them, they like this style. And here's another really simple one. So these are the three we're going to go through today. And I guess what we'll do is we'll be able to see what the timing is on them. They really, I guess if you do a lot of sponging, don't take a lot of time. So the only thing that I have done already, though, is pre-cut my papers. And so for this first one, we're just going to jump in. For this first one, we've got an A2 card base. It's just regular Whisper White. Wow, tongue twister this morning. Whisper White. That's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 folded. And then I created for this one, I don't know if you can see the dimension there. I've popped up the frame with dimensional strips and then inlaid the image just to add it a little bit of interest to it. So I've gone ahead and created my frame and my centerpiece, and I did that using the stitched rectangle dies. um, as you can see, these are used a lot. I love this stitched look. And when they came out with these pretty much sit right by my die cutting machine, and I use them a lot. So that's what I used for these. And to create it, all I did is I took this, oops, wrong one. I took this die cut, okay, and then you layer the next one in, okay, and that's how you come up with a frame. That'll be a whole nother video, but you're just creating a frame, so you're just layering your dies. And then I've cut a little piece, which is going to be my snowbank, and I used the same stitch die here that I used on the little piece on this one. I only need a piece, so long. So as a matter of fact, we'll just start with that. I'm going to grab some scissors, and the bottom edge of this is what is stitched. And I'm just going to create my snowbank. It doesn't need to be very big. It's just where the deer are going to sit. And to create a snowbank, you simply just cut a little wavy kind of snowbank there. There you go. You have your snowbank. It's all done. And since we're going to use that as snow, I'm going to take my Winka Stella and just add some shimmer to that so it looks like snow. And we will set that aside to dry. Now I've already cut out my deer for this. These deer come from the Snow Globe Scenes dies. You've got a deer, you've got bears. This is an adorable set, and the stamp set that coordinates with it, I'll have it all in the description below. You can actually create little snow globes. And if you look at my video tutorials, I did create a video on creating an actual snow globe with the water and the glycerin and everything. So if you look on my YouTube channel, you'll see how to create an actual snow globe. This is the set that I used. I love this. It's got a church. It's got a little schoolhouse building. Of course, it's got the bears and the deer, which will go with anything. So I usually just cut out a bunch of those and have them set up. So on this one, we have our one male deer, and I created a female deer by simply cutting off the horns. And you can leave just a little tiny piece there for the ear if you want to. Just kind of round it off a little bit there. And it just looks like her other ear. And then for this, you just simply trim off the bottom. They have that little piece there on the bottom for when you're doing the snow globe. So we have our female deer, and then we have our male deer, which I'm just going to trim the bottom of. Aren't these just adorable? Look at that. And that such detail. Love it. And now for him, so that he'll be facing her. He's got to look at her. You don't want her chasing him. So we have those two, and they're all set up, and they're ready to go. So let's jump in to the sponging part. I'm going to set my frame aside and my card base. Now, to create this snow, I use a product that is called Molotow Liquid Art Mask. Okay, this is the refill bottle. I've had it for, oh my God, I'd say easily I've had this 3 years, and I'm still almost all the way full. Almost all the way. You use very little on this, but I love liquid mask. If you've seen any of my videos, you've seen that I use it quite a bit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in a piece of scrap paper, and we are going to create this snow so that after we stamp our images and things and we remove the mask, it'll look like white falling snow. So all I did is take a one of my acrylic blocks. I have an old paintbrush here. It's not very big. It's a little paintbrush. And we're going to take our liquid mask, shake it up. There's a little, you'll hear a little, I don't know if you can hear that. There's a little shaker ball in there. So all I'm going to do is take a little of this, and it'll come right off your block. It's not going to hurt it. So I'm going to put a little there. I'm going to take my paintbrush. Let me zoom in a little for you. See if I can come in a little for you here. Let me adjust that. Okay, so I'm going to take my paintbrush, dip it in the mask, and then I'm just going to splatter it onto my sheet. And you can splatter the whole sheet because it will have the bottom will be covered by our snowbank. Remember the snowbank we made. Oh, all right, we got a little thick there on a couple spots because I just dropped the. There we go. That should be enough snow, I think. Let me get a couple little dabs right in. I want it fairly covered because they're going to be in a snowstorm. Okay. Now I'm just going to take a, I'll grab my baby wipes, and I'll just clean off my block. Wipes it right off. This stuff won't hurt it. And then I'll take this later and rinse it off in the kitchen sink. It'll be fine. So I'm going to set this aside here. If you haven't tried this liquid mask, I'll try to put a link to it in the description below. I get it on Amazon. You can get it either like this as a refill, or it also has one that's a pen. I use the refill because then I can use a smaller brush instead of it's a fairly large, it's about the size of the tip of this, is the pen size. So it's a little cumbersome if you're trying to do something very fine. So I would just buy the refill and get a little tiny brush. And as a matter of fact, I have a dedicated brush just for my, yeah, as you can see, it's still got mask on it. It's just a little cheap dollar brush, if even a dollar, that I use just for that. So anyway, moving along. I am going to dry this mask. Since the drops are a little thick, it takes it a minute to dry, but normally it dries fairly quickly. So I'm just going to dry this. The drops are pretty thick, so that's why it's taking a second to dry. I got a couple of little thick ones there. Okay, so while that's finishing drying, what we're going to use on the colors of this one, I'll set it here so you can see it. So I'm going to use some Pacific Point, some Mango Melody, and down here on the bottom, I have just a little bit of soft suede. Okay, so we have our inks. And I'm just using sponge daubers. I'll have a link to them. You can use whatever you're comfortable using. If you are comfortable using regular sponges, or the new craze is the blender brushes now. A lot of people are using those. You can use those. I haven't gotten into them yet. I've always used my little daubers because I have them all labeled for my different colors and things like that. So we are going to, I'm going to move this just a little. I'd like you to be able to see it so we can see what we're doing, but let's see if I can move out just a little bit there for you. So I set my daubers with my inks, and we are going to start. Let's see if these are dry yet. I should have probably done that part first. Yeah, they're pretty much dry. So I'm going to start on the bottom. Remember, we have our little snowbank. So I'm just going to gently lay that right there and figure out where I only want my brown to go a little above that. So it's about right there. So I'm just going to always start off your paper when you're sponging. It keeps you from getting something like that I just did, where you have a big blotch. So we're just lightly going to sponge some of this soft suede. And it's okay if I have dark spots at the bottom, because that's going to be covered by my just trying to get a little shadow going up there off the snowbank. And your sponging is going to go right over that masking. It's not going to come off until we go to remove it. Okay? So we've got a little bit of our soft suede. Got myself a little blotch there. I'm going to try to blend it a little bit. So do as I say, not as I do. I daubed right on there without being off the paper. So do as I say, not as I do. Now we're going to bring in some Mango Melody for our next layer, which is going to be our sunset layer here. And we're going to go about the middle of the sheet here. Like I said, I like to come off of my sheet. And go ahead and go into your brown just a little bit. And it just kind of blends the color for you. I smeared it wasn't quite dry there. But that's okay, we can go right over it. Make sure your mask is dry before you start doing this. So we're doing our center sunset area. We're blending it down into our soft suede. Kind of want my sunset a little bit bold, and it's going to be bolder toward the bottom because your sun is setting. And then it's going to fade up into our sky. And you see it's not removing the mask. You're all good there. I want to blend it into my suede a little more because I had a few blotches there. Okay, so we've got our Mango Melody. Now we're going to bring in our Pacific Point. I've got a little smear of my fluid here. This is a adhesive eraser, and that's all I use to remove my mask. I've got a little smear of mask here. I'm just touching it up because I didn't let it dry. And I don't want the smears. Okay, so that's fixed. Now on your Pacific Point, I would start in a corner because your corner edges and your top edge are going to be the darker. So start off your sheet, go along the edge. And I always try to do my corners are always just a little bit darker than the rest. And then I'm just going to barely blend it down into my sunset. And I'm just working in a circular motion. And I'm keeping a steady pressure. If you press too hard, you're going to end up with blotches like I did here. Okay? But that's going to be okay. Sponging is a very forgiving technique. It really is. I do a lot of sponging. This would be a really good, if you know how to brayer well. I do know how to brayer, but not as well as I do sponging. I seem to have better control of, say, like I wanted these corners darker. I can control that with my sponge. I can't seem to control that with a brayer. I really need to watch some videos. I'm assuming Michelle Zindorf, who is just, her stuff is absolutely stunning and amazing, and I would consider her the brayering queen. Okay, so now we've got our base piece here, and we're going to bring in our Stampartus. Now for this one, I used the Winter Woods, and I used this line of trees here. I'm thinking I want to change that up, and I'm going to stick with, let's try Snowfront. This is a new set that's in the holiday catalog. Love, love. If you like that watercolor look, or these kind of watercolor scenes, you need to get this set. It's just beautiful. So what we're going to do, I'm going to close up these colored inks. And then I'm just going to bring in my Memento Black because I do a lot of black. And let's do a different set of trees. Let's do a row of these trees here. It's kind of a medium length because I want it to go the height of my unit here, where the trees are in the background of our deer. So I usually just line up my Stampartus or my project on one of the grid lines just in case something moves. I know I was on a grid line. So let's pull out our stamp. And I'm going to show you a trick with this Stampartus. Let's try something. I'm going to show you. Set up your Stampartus in the opposite side way here. And I'm going to show you a trick. So you've got your Stampartus and it closes this way. Okay. Set up your first tree. Let's go over a little bit here. Set up your first tree. Pick up your stamp. Make sure you're still lined up there. Now let's ink it up. I'm going to show you this really fun trick. Oh, snowbite. So we're going to stamp our image. I'm going to do it one more time. I like it nice and crisp and black. So I'm inking it up again. Now I'm going to show you how you can keep this tree in line to do the rest of your trees. Simply pick up your Stampartus, pull it out, move your one notch, move it over one more notch. And this tree is going to line up perfectly right the same height next to the other one. That was one of the things I found the best about the Stampartus. If you're doing a same image multiple times and you need it to stay in line, now we're going to pick up our plate, move it one more notch. See? It's still perfect. I'm going to move my magnets a little bit here. I'm going to stamp it again. Oops. I usually, as you see, stamp mine twice. Now your masking fluid's there, so if you it kind of works like a little bit of a ledge on some of those dots. So you want your tree right up on there. So just press firmly, like you would if you had a paper mask there. You know how you have to get the edge. Look at that. Now I'm going to try to move these magnets without moving the project. And now I'm going to move it one more notch down and stamp my tree again. Isn't this the neatest that you can do that with this? Love it. You guys know I'm a huge advocate for this Stampartus. As a matter of fact, just to own it, I own two of them. Yeah, I have one that I travel with when I go to functions or friends' houses. I have one that's on my desk at all times. So make sure that's stamped nice and dark. Now we'll clean off our stamp a little and get it out of the way. Trying to grab a baby wipe. Sorry, I cannot find my chamois to save me. It's probably in my travel bag, I'll bet. Didn't even think about that till just now. Okay, so now we've got our image. We can move our Stampartus aside. So now we're going to add our snowbank. Oh, you know what we can do? We're done with our stamping. Take your adhesive eraser, and if not, you can use your finger, and it'll just scrub right off. But I just use my little adhesive razor, which you can see is very, very well used. If you have one of these, they last forever. You just kind of trim the edges, and you just take your adhesive eraser and remove your liquid mask. Look, your snowdrops or your snowflakes are coming to life. Comes right off. What's weird is that you can sponge, you can stamp, and it doesn't come off. I use liquid mask a lot. Ever since I learned it, and I've been using it for years, I always assumed everybody knew about it. But I have several people in my team that didn't, so I thought, oh, I better link to that. So now I'm going to add my snowbank, and we're just going to use regular, you can use tape if you want. You know me, I'm a liquid glue fan. So I'm just going to add my glue. My thing's a little, it's running low. And then you're just going to attach it to the bottom here. I'm just lining it up at the bottom edge. Okay. Now, since I have that little blob right there, I'm actually going to put my little female deer right over that. I usually, when I have something real small like this, I use my little tweezers to hold on to it. Kind of get a tiny little dot on the feet so it's going to stay there. And I'm going to put her right over that little sponging faux pas right there. And now we're going to add him, and we want him facing her. And we'll just put him about right there. Now, if you want to, if you wanted more snow or not, you can just use a white gel pen, touch up any of your spots, and just add a couple little drops of snow with your white gel pen. The reason I don't do the whole thing with gel pen is, one, it would take quite a while to do, and as you notice when you use gel pen, it's not, unless you go over it several times, I don't know if you can see that, it's not as vibrant white as if you just left it like that. So now we're going to bring in the card base, and we're going to do our frame first before you lay this down. So usually you can just use your dimensionals. I have a little bit of foam tape here. And I'm just going to use my foam tape. I'm out of my Stampin' Up! One, which I just really love. I'm waiting for hopefully my order will come today. I love my foam. Everything I do, I either pop up or sponge, so I use quite a bit of foam strips. So we're going to put our, oops, our foam on our frame. Well, I've done a lot of tongue twisters in this video. You can use regular dimensionals for this. If you don't have any foam strips or you're out, on the sides of your dimensional strips, just little tips and trick, use the edge of it. And you actually end up, as you see, I use the edge of mine all the time. So you get full use of those adhesive strips. Or, you know, foam dots. Just use the edges as your foam strips. So I'll add my glue. When you put glue on a foam strip or even a dimensional, if you add a dab of glue, you can actually move the item a little bit. Because, you know, not all the time can you lay something down just perfectly straight. So if you use a little bit of glue on the tape side of your dimensionals or your foam tape, then you can lay it down and be able to move it a little bit. See, I can shift this a little bit just to make sure that it's square. I'll get it into place here. And now this one, we're going to add our adhesive. Well, I guess I need some glue. I'm waiting for my order. I ran out of simple things like my adhesive, and I'm running real low on my Whisper White cardstock. So hopefully my order will arrive today. I can barely get this glue to come out of here. So now what you do is take two corners and tuck them underneath, and then line it. Since you're using glue, you can shift it a little with your fingers to make sure it's square in the hole. Look at there. See, that really didn't take long. If you want, this one I wasn't going to put a greeting, but before you put your frame down, you can stamp a greeting. And this greeting comes from Itty Bitty Christmas. If you got this far and forgot to do it, again, we're going to bring in the Stampartus and see if we can't just stamp that while the card is assembled. You just may have to do it a couple times to make sure it. So let's go ahead. I get ahead of myself. Let's do peace and happiness. No, I kind of like that. We're going to go back to season's greetings. I get an idea in my head and I need to stick with my first thought normally. So what we'll do is we'll put our project in here. Put our strips down. I'm going to line this up. It's nice and small, so it fits right in the edge of this. Make sure that's on there straight. And just grab our Memento Black. You can do a tag greeting on there if you wanted to. So we're just going to stamp that down. There we go. Look at that. Saved. Saved by the bell. All right, there was our first card. I guess I don't have a timer on here. And if I didn't jibber jabber, I would say that card went fairly quickly. So there's our first one. Set that aside. And now I'm going to show you sponging of snowbanks and such. So let's do this guy right here. We're going to use our little bears. Let's set that aside. So on this one, again, I have my A2 card base, and then I just have one of the stitch die cuts. Seems to fit perfectly there. Now you could do this one the same way where you do a frame and everything, but this one I plan on just laying directly onto my card base. So now to create your snowbanks for sponging here, you set this aside. Get yourself a Post-it note. And you're simply going to take your Post-it note, and I usually try to use the part with the sticky, and we are going to make a snowbank. So you just kind of cut a wavy snowbank. And I'm going to put it at a little bit of an angle on this one, and I'll show you why. So this one, I wanted to have a little bit of purple sky. But I'm going to start with my Mango Melody, and we'll also be using Gorgeous Gray. I always start with my lighter colors first, because then it's a little more forgiving. So our sunset is going to be starting off the sheet. Our sunset's going to be a little off to the left here. And it's always going to be a little darker in the corner, and then just draw some down along your snow bank there. Okay. Now we'll bring in our Gorgeous Gray. And it's always darker in the corners the way I do mine. So I'm going to start in that corner off the paper and blend into our Mango Melody a little bit there. Make sure our little corner's darker. And then just with a firm but steady pressure, just go across it. Now if you press down real hard, you're going to end up with blotches. Sponging is very, very forgiving. And I'm always starting off, and I'm going to start from the darkest area. So if I want this top corner dark, then that's where I'm going to start each time I come onto the paper. And it's automatically going to give me the dark area I want. And right here, we're going to have a couple trees. So it's always going to be just a little bit darker on the edge there by the trees. Okay. So now we'll put our purple and our mango away. I usually close mine because a lot of times if I'm doing multiple colors and I've got my dauber in my hand, I'm just going. And a lot of times you take the chance of going in to the wrong color when you don't want to. So now we're going to bring in our balmy blue. If you don't have balmy blue, you only need a really light pale blue. Okay, so we have our first snowbank there. But before, I messed up here. So before you remove your mask, let's bring in our Stampartus. I'm not used to working in my film space where I do my videos is very small. So my normal work desk is huge. Pretty much my whole sheet cave is desks. So I'm going to put this here, leave our mask on it, and we're going to pick the little trees we want to put here. So we're going to bring in our snow front, and you have several little trees here. Now snow front, you can actually do this with your balmy blue where you sponge that blue and then these black. But I'm doing mine old school, so I'm going to grab the tiny little trees here that are in our set. So I got one there. There's another little tiny tree here somewhere. Where is he? There he is. Tiny little guy. So I'm going to put my tree. I'm not going to do the whole tree because it's way in the distance, these little trees. So I kind of want them smaller. And it looks like the angle I'm at, I'm going to do one tree at a time here. So I'm just inking the top. And the other reason you'll want to use your Stampartus for this is so you will want to be able to stamp it twice. Because you've already sponged some ink on here, and a lot of times you've got to be able to see it's not quite firmly dark. So I just ink it up again. And now you've got a paper edge there. So be sure to push your stamp down pretty firmly right where that paper edge is. And that way your image goes right to the edge of your paper there. Okay? So now I want a little bit smaller tree. So I'm just going to use a little part of this tree. Yep, one more time. And now what you can do is take those two trees again, offset it. So offset it between the two trees. Put the other one right next to it. It's kind of hard to do since we're doing just a small, and they're sticking to my finger. I'm going to pick those two little trees up. I'm going to ink them up, but I'm only going to stamp them once, so that if they are faint, that's fine. Just stamp them down. And you kind of end up with little trees in the background. And you can do the same again to fill in any spots. We just want a little cluster, a little tiny cluster of trees there on the horizon. I'll add one more. And it's okay if it's light, because then it'll look like trees behind trees. Okay, there we go. So now we'll pick up our mask. And I'm going to wipe this a little bit because that's going to be wet. I just don't want to get black in my blue. Drying it a little bit. Okay, so now for our next snowbank, you want your snowbank to kind of go the opposite direction. Okay, so there's your snowbank. And we're going to use our balmy blue. Now I know that my house that I'm going to stamp, our little house, okay, is going to go a little bit in the curve of this bank. So if you want your bank to look like it's 3D and dimensional, then the bigger and a little bit darker area is going to go right in that area. And then just lightly go across, barely touching your sponge to the paper. Okay? It may not look like much, but as soon as you pick it up, it's going to show that snowbank. So now we're going to bring in our little house. You could put any of them in here. You could put the deer standing back here. You could put the house. Okay, so well, you know what? Since we're changing it up, I'll show you how to do that. We're going to put the little deer here. And then we're going to take just the very tops of these trees so it looks like they're in grass. Let's go ahead and do our deer first. So we're going to stamp those in black. Our little deer that are out in the field. And I've done them just a little bit off the paper. Okay, so they're going to be standing in the snow. So their little feet are going to be covered by snow, in other words. So we got our little deer. And I'm going to take the very tops of these trees and make it look like little, like there's a little tiny shrub or a bush there. So I'm barely using the tops of those trees. So just ink up the top. And stamp your shrub. Then I'm going to offset it just a little bit and add a little bit more shrub. As you can tell, I kind of design and make these as I go. I really don't put a lot of thought into what I'm building. I just kind of look at it as I'm building it. Because like most things you do with stamping, just be yourself. If you think something's going to look good, then odds are it probably does. You know, just go with your own personal likes or dislikes of something. Everybody's vision of something is a form of art. So whether or not you make something the way I make it, or you make something the way you make it, it's all art. It's all art in the eye of the beholder. I'll get off my little horse now, but okay. So remember our deer are down in the little hole here. So we're just going to barely daub a little bit darker right by their feet. Just barely. And it's going to look like there's a snowbank behind them. Okay. See where it makes it look deeper and they're behind the snowbank? There you go. So now I'm going to move my paper. How do I want to do this? I'm going to put a couple more shrubs right over here. So we're going to take the tops of our tree again, and we're just going to add a little bit of tree shrub there. Oh, look what I just did. Oh, welcome to my world. This is why I got the name Ink Spot for my business. My husband always called me Ink Spot because I was always covered in ink. So that's how Tina's Crafty Ink Spot got its name. A little trivia there. Ink washes off. It's all good. So there we go. We've got another little bank of bushes there. So we're going to bring back in our balmy blue. And your darkest area is going to go right behind that tree, just a little bit higher than the rest. And you can actually, with something so small, just dab your dauber and it'll go on your line. So you can just dab it a little bit there. And you end up with your snowbank. See how it kind of looks when you do it from thin to a little bit thicker and out, it gives it that 3D effect. So now we want to bring in our big tree again. So now we've gone from our little tiny trees in the back to our big tree up front. So let's just put that about right there. What did I do with my black that I had all over me? I just moved it. Oh, here it is. I moved it out of the way so I'd stop sticking my hand in it. As you can tell, this is a very impromptu video. I was making these and I got several requests to show how I come up with my ideas, and this is it. This is how I come up with my ideas. I just kind of wing it, go with it. I'm going to clean that up. Now I'm going to just bring in my paper to do my snowbank right around my tree. So darker right by the tree, darker and a little farther up, and then just dab a small line next to it. See? Looks like it's stuck inside the snowbank. Okay, now this to me looks just a tad sparse. So let's bring in another larger tree. I'm going to grab my mask. I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to come down just a little bit onto my snowbank, and I'm going to add a larger tree here on the edge. And by not going all the way to the bottom of the stamp, we're going to make this tree look like it's in a snowbank. Because we're not going all the way to the bottom. I'm going to stamp that one more time. Okay, put my lid on that. We're going to bring in our blue and go right on the edge there, right by our tree. And if you want, you can bring it down just a skosh and get the blue in there. So that tree is actually in a snowbank. Okay? So basically, that card is done, except I decided this one, we were going to have some bears and our deer. So let's take our little bears, and let's figure this is mama bear and baby bear. Okay? So we're just going to find my tweezers. Oh, I guess I don't have them, so let's put mama bear here. And little baby bear. Isn't they cute? Okay, we're going to bring our little dauber back in and just barely do by their feet. You know, some of this is just small detail. It's just how I do things. We're just putting a little bit of color below their feet. So one, it gives them a little bit of shadow, and it makes them look like they're walking on a snowbank. So that is it. That is done. Now all we need to do is add it to our card base. And I'm going to glue this one directly down. Use your tape, use your favorite adhesive. I always try to make sure my corners are good. And I'm going to come up just a hair, so it's going to be offset from the bottom, coming up just a hair and square, and I can put a greeting right there. So we'll bring our Stampartus back in. Oops, I got ink on there a little bit. I can wipe that off. And let's figure out what greeting we want. Let's do peace and happiness. And I'm going to offset it from the edge of my project. And I'm just going to do it in black. Black and white is kind of a, you can't go wrong. You might be able to do this one in the purple, would probably look really pretty. We're just going to put peace and happiness right there. There we go. We have created another fun project. What do you think? That's basically how simple the sponging is. There you go. Now this last card was done basically the same way, but instead of your tree here, which is your second dimension, I've put the house. And then these small trees, which are your furthest away, I put behind the house. And then just added some trees and another one of our fun deer. Matted this one in black. That is how simple sponging is, and quick. We just did 2 cards in maybe 30 minutes. If I wouldn't have jabbered, it would have probably been less. I hope you liked today's video, and have a happy stamping day. Bye-bye now.